Okay, as Pascal said, I'm with LIGO. I'm presenting on the SciTokens, the state of the SciTokens transition at LIGO. I wanted to say a little bit about where we started, our goals, what we've done so far, and our plans going forward. But where we started is pretty common for everybody here. We use X509 certificates for authentication, and possession of a cert basically implies identity. We have a number of services for reading and writing data that use X509 certificates. And why make the transition? What's our motivation? And we share this motivation with a lot of people, the transition from OSG 3.5 to 3.6, the retirement of support for the Grid Community Toolkit. If that's sort of the stick, the carrot is improved security. Jim Basney and the SciTokens.org team made a great case for the security benefits of SciTokens versus X509 certificates. And the last motivation is right now, LIGO is between observing runs. We're not taking data at this point. We're going to start up again for our next observing run, which is called 04, in June 2022. And we hope to have any disruptive changes done before then. That motivates our timeline. Let's see. So our goals, similar. We just want to replace X509 certificates with SciTokens. We'll consider it a good end if we can retire our Python script LIGO proxy init, which is how users get X509 certificates, which they then pass around via HT Condor and use to access various services via the command line. Also, it would be nice to remove reliance on LIGO.org Kerberos credentials and rely more on federated identities. Along with our goals are certain use cases that pretty much have to be satisfied to have a successful transition. Of course, our HT Condor jobs have to be able to run. They have to be able to access all of the data that they need to run. The CLI tools that depend on X509 certificates need to work with SciTokens. Robots need to be supported. Cron jobs, GitLab, CI jobs, those need to work. And finally, last but not least, the researcher's laptop use case. That's very important. Our researchers need to be able to access data from, air quotes, their laptops. Fortunately, at LIGO, we only have to support 64-bit Linux, and pretty much we can limit that to one version. Previously, it's been Scientific Linux 7. Going forward, it'll be something based on CentOS 8, Red Hat 8, probably Rocky Linux. Other operating systems are supported as best effort. It'd be great if something runs under Macs or Windows boxes, but we only have to support the Linux case. So our first steps, first, we have a lot of support. Jim Basney, the SciTokens, SciAuth projects. Dave Dykstra has pretty much handed us our solution. Brian Bockelman's been great in helping us work with X-Root-D. We've had bi-weekly working meetings with where the LIGO team meets with the token experts, and that's been great. And we've been using the OSG Slack, which is another great resource. The first thing we did when we started with SciTokens is just to do a little test to make sure that we understood things. And so we set up a local issuer with in HT Condor, and basically the issuer, the thing with the public key was just a static website. And I don't want to talk too much about that because that would probably take more time than I have. But I did want to say that it was a great revelation. We learned that issuer is kind of an overloaded term. It's the value of ISS in the SciToken payload, and that's where a server is going to get the public key to make sure that it can trust the SciToken. But also in common conversation, it is the thing that generates SciTokens, the issuer. And they really, besides the fact that one has the public key that corresponds to the other's private key, they have nothing to do with each other and in the architecture, which is, well, that was an interesting thing that we learned from this. I'm not going to touch on the other 2 points here. And I'm going to go directly to what we've sort of adopted as our solution going forward. And the first point isn't really a feature of Vault plus CI logon. That's what we're calling our solution. It's really the definition of it. This paper is a secure command line solution for token-based authentication by Dave Dijkstra. I think even if you're not going to use Vault plus CI logon, it's a great read for SciTokens background. But he lays out all the features in more detail than I could lay out here. This solution checks off a lot of our boxes: HT Condor integration, Kerberos support and convenient CLI, easy integration and adoption with existing workflows. If you're used to K-initting, it's frictionless once you do the initial OIDC workflow. Support for long-lived process robots, that's checked off. There's 2 possible ways of doing that. It supports the researcher laptop use case. HT-get token, which is part of the solution, works the same on a researcher's laptop as it does on the cluster for getting a SciToken. And it doesn't hurt that we have a direct line to the developers and support from them. So our current state, we have a development testing of Vault server. We have the research laptop use case covered. I'm going to have a note about Cogger that I'm going to talk about at the end of this slide. HT Condor use case is supported. Robot use case is supported. OIDC workflow as an alternative to Kerberos. And we see the light at the end of the tunnel. After going through working with CVMFS, XRD, we kind of see a path forward for our other services. And now the note about Cogra is that based upon the history of our identity and access management, another organization, Virgo, which is a detector, another gravitational wave detector in Italy, it's an organization and they have their own authorization system, but Virgo users get LIGO.org credentials. Cogra users don't. And so Virgo users can use Kerberos, but Cogra users can't. And so that means that they will have a different experience. They will always have to use the OIDC workflow, and they won't be able to use the Kerberos workflow. And we want to work on finding a solution that has, it's a little more like the Kerberos workflow, possibly SSH keys for authentication to Vault. Our next steps, where we're going, we have work to do finalizing our namespaces. And by that, I mean the audience values and the payload and the scope values. We want to do that right. And it's not easy. It requires a coordination between the CI logon configuration, the people who configure LDAP, group of groups, and the people that run services and configure them and write them, modify the behavior. And our outstanding issues, things that we really need to think about. Well, first, we have an issue with our access to XRD data. We can't access the data. We can access the metadata, but not the data. We think this is a known issue, and it has something to do with our origin server, but we're working on that. recently, we've become, or at least some of our service owners have been brought up the point of tracing and auditing being a requirement. They need to know, they need to associate accesses to the services with some responsible party and an identity. And that identity is encoded in the subclaim of our tokens. CI logon can be flexible about what goes into that subclaim. And we're thinking of just putting our usernames in there. And if we do that, it's going to be on the honor system for services not to use that subclaim for authorization. We really want them to just use the SciTokens scope claims. But we really can't enforce that. And someone brought up GDPR implications for Virgo users. And this is a question we haven't really even discussed much, but we're going to be looking into what that means. So our timeline going forward is still pretty much the same. We hope to have a production level vault service and at least some early adopters, hopefully some of our bigger pipelines by the end of 2021. And we hope to complete the transition by the start of the next observing run in June 2022. And that's about it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ron. Yes, thanks for actually finishing way ahead of time. So we have plenty of time for questions, or we can do an extensive break, but the floor is open for anybody who would like to ask any questions to Ron about his presentation on the LIGO update and tokens. I'll actually ask a question. Can you give us a short answer on any implications on the transition from X509 or all of the things that you guys are doing for tokens on the part of the data management workflow for LIGO that relies on Rusio and replication across the different ends of the collaboration?
Is James available to answer that? I think he knows a lot more about Rusio than I do. I know almost nothing about Rusio, actually.
Okay, I was just wondering if it is part of the whole strategy to integrate the approach for Rusio as part of the transition for tokens for LIGO.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And James is working on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, guys? Oh, Dave Dykstra raised a hand. Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the Kerberos. LIGO has already been using Kerberos. They had their own Kerberos, and that's unusual for VOs. Most VOs don't do that, and they've also he had one of his points listed. Ron had one of his points listed that they'd like to try to avoid use of Kerberos. And I wanted to point out that I'm expecting that at some point the Vault solution will also accept SSH agent as for renewing access to the tokens. So and in fact, there was just recently found out that there already is a Vault plugin that could be used as the basis for that. So so that will be another alternative for those who find SSH agent to be more convenient than Kerberos for renewal. So the way the Vault works is first use OIDC authentication to get the refresh token in the first place, and then but that only lasts a limited amount of time, like a week or so, but you can renew it with Kerberos right now, and in the future we'll be able to renew it with SSH agent as well.
Yes, we're looking forward to that. That's nice.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any other questions for Ron? Okay.
Oh, I'd
Okay.
just like to say one more thing.
Sure.
In the slide, there's obviously a lot more content in there than I was able to cover. But there's a video on one of the slides that you can look at that basically demonstrates what we mean by OIDC workflow. That's something that it's hard to get across in text.